James Ferraro is probably the only artist to have invented 37 genres of music under 7,500 different artist names, while still having the time to put out tastefully and artistically done Roblox machinimas. Pretty much every year since 2004, he's released at least 3 discographies worth of music across every conceivable piece of technology that you can play recorded things on, making for a grand total of roughly 175 different projects, according to Thomas. He began making a name for himself among Californians who like to listen to static when he teamed up with his noise buddy Spencer Clark to form a duo called the Skaters. These guys mainly specialized in freeform avant-garde music, ranging from the hellish and harsh Dark Rye Bread, Palm Shaper, and Deformed Baby puking on his mother, which was so up it didn't even get a name, to more unsettling ambient endeavors like Crowned Purple Gowns, Dripping Avenues, and Dispersed Royalty Ornaments. These projects are more interesting to look back on as building blocks of his sound rather than highlights for me, though their final album, Physicalities of the Sensibilities of Ingrediential Stairways, is the band's most definitive project, according to this interview that James gave with Mr. Red Bull over 10 years ago. It's a bit more accessible and less rough compared to some of his other projects, with these distant vocals and noise motifs making me feel like I'm in the basement of a factory with the walls slowly closing in, especially when the drums start to ramp up. Also, they did a split with Yellow Swans, which is kinda neat. Around the time that these records were being released, as most of them were recorded within the same year, James and Spencer were doing a lot of touring and traveling, focusing on their own respective solo material, on their own respective indie labels, New Age tapes, and New Age cassettes. I wonder how that argument got started. Though New Age tapes only lasted from around 2004 to 2009, a lot of the projects he put out on this label are often credited with pioneering the hypnagogic pop genre, which is kind of vague and hard to define, but I'll do my best. Hypnagogia is the dreamlike state you're in when you're about to fall asleep but aren't quite there yet, and pop is, well, you know, pop music. Hypnagogic pop is anything that your sleep paralysis demon plays on their boombox, whether it be the underwater glam rock of Ariel Pink, the haunted new wave of Jack Stauber, or the cursed yet groovy jam sessions of Lamborghini Crystal, a duo consisting of JCPV and James Ferraro. Oh, who would have guessed that? It's funny though, I've never heard of JCPV outside of the Discogs page for this duo, and every time I try Googling them, it doesn't seem like any actual results come up. It's kind of a weird mystery. A lot of his music is Lamborghini Crystal and other names from around this time, was made to soundtrack art installations he was doing in New York City and in friends' basements. For example, his 2007 album, a soundtrack to piece he made out of cans of Raid cockroach spray, and I wish there was a picture of it. He's described these albums as weird B-movie style trash inspired by huffing aerosol cans, and it's easy to hear that on records like Smoking Out His Majesty's UFO, Dial 747 Creepazoid, and 1992 Cool Runnings, which was later reissued as Live at Slimer Beach by Grippers Know Their Oncers, and is the only Lamborghini Crystal album currently available on streaming. This is where his work from this era really starts to shine for me, as it's similar in production and pacing to the Skaters, but now with catchy guitar riffs and funny vocals. If you like waking up at 2 p.m. and doing whippets, then this album is for you. New Age also saw the release of such classics as Multitopia, inspired by the cultural changes surrounding September 11th, and is filled with these lo-fi, harsh keyboard improvisations and weird news clips.
Rumor number 5, that Howard's helping a 22-year-old woman auction off her virginity.
I don't feel like defending myself to my kids about something that's in the paper that isn't true.
The Jarvin 9 trilogy, which I don't have the patience to listen to all 7 hours of, but people on Rate Your Music seem to think is pretty cool, and Chameleon Ballet, which is built around more straightforward synth arpeggios, and has been described by James as the waking memory of a romantic alien encounter occurring in a dream. Many of these projects were remastered and reissued on vinyl via Old English Spelling Bee, a label that is now infamous in the vaporwave community, but were pretty cool back in the day. They remastered his 2008 album, Last American Hero, but only the first half of it, and this is probably my favorite of his early ambient projects. Unlike a lot of Skaters, Lamborghini Crystal, and even the Jarvin 9 albums, Last American Hero is very simple. The A-side is broken up into 3 sections, which make up the 3 tracks on the vinyl reissue, and all of them are centered around a twangy, bluesy electric guitar riff that repeats as the backing track slowly gets louder and more tense. It feels like wandering through an expansive, dusty wasteland made out of concrete and Best Buys, which is fitting to the ethos behind the record.
I went back and stayed with my grandparents actually in Florida again, and like they live in this like really, insane gated community of like senior citizens and like large like flat screen TVs and like just insane IKEA couches, like, you know what I mean, that you can't even really sit on. So I kind of felt like when I was there, I was just in this like dome, you know what I mean, this like science experiment, this like weird maze of like consumerism. And
the vinyl comes with this insert giving a little story underneath each of the tracks, framing modern technology in this primitive light. The first one is about a man falling in love with his car, which is referred to as his metal slave. The second is about an empty can of Monster Energy littering the earth as the consumer has gained more energy and power as the alpha hunter. And the final one is a series of news headlines, including a group of people who went missing for a decade because they were stuck in the back rooms of Costco, and Judge Judy's guilt fetish simulation. All this added context makes the album more interesting to talk about, but even if it weren't there at all, it'd still be every bit as enjoyable for me as a catchy, post-apocalyptic piece of ambient music. The B-side, Adrenaline's End, is a bit catchier and more optimistic, feeling like escaping into the light outside of this hyper-consumerist dome. These themes of technology evolving at a rate faster than most humans can keep up with plays a pivotal role in the staticky, sporadic radio concept album iAsia. This project is comprised of 3 really long sound collages that sound like they're blasting from an AM radio in a distant car. This is one of his more popular releases, and for good reason. There's not a lot of music out there that really sounds like this, but I honestly don't have a ton to say about it. I saw a YouTube comment that said it was the pet sounds of Eurodisco cell phone ads, and I don't think I can top that. In 2010, James decided to actually put the word pop and hypnagogic pop to good use with albums like On Air and Night Dolls with Hairspray. The former strikes this really cool balance of pop melodies, ambience, and noise, containing some of my favorite songs from him, like Jetset Cowboys and the title track, but is for some reason one of his hardest to find on the internet outside of YouTube uploads of the entire album. Night Dolls with Hairspray, on the other hand, has more than earned its place as a classic in the genre, even though the Bandcamp link doesn't work every time I try to buy it. Shut up and take my $8, please! He's described this album as the more completed vision of what he was going for with Lamborghini Crystal, mimicking the feeling of getting high off of whatever fumes he could find in his house as a kid and then watching weird B-movies on VHS. This is a good album to start with if you're just getting into James Ferraro or hypnagogic pop in general, because 1, it's hilarious, and 2, it's actual pop music. 11 tracks and about 50 minutes of songs with actual hooks, vocal melodies, verses, the whole shebang, none of this 25-minute shit. It feels like watching an old VHS taping of a late-night MTV block full of cursed glam rock revival sung by Bart Simpson. Some standouts on the record include the ominous, audio-clipping new wave of Roses and Mystery, the twangy indie rock of Buffy Honkerbug's Answering Machine, and Runaway, which is one of the prettiest pop songs I've ever heard, despite sounding like it was recorded with 2 red solo cups and a piece of string. But of course, the most notable song on the album, even according to James himself, is Leather High School, and I firmly believe you are a different person before and after you hear this song. It's hilarious, disgusting, catchy, and arguably a top 5 track he's ever made. I'm not gonna say anything else about it, just go listen to it if you haven't. I find it fascinating how James's music up to this point has consistently held its themes of nostalgia, consumerism, and technology, while exploring a wide variety of sounds and genres that barely even existed before him. Around the time of Night Dolls with Hairspray in the early 2010s, other artists in the underground like Vectroid, Skeleton, and One Tricks Point Never, who James would actually collaborate with in 2011 for a one-off ambient project, were pioneering a new genre known as Vaporwave, centered around themes of nostalgia, consumerism, and technology. Oh, hey, what's up, buddy? You trying to get in on this? Well, musically, Vaporwave started off as a crude sample-based genre with echo jams and floral shop being made up of slowed down, repetitive fragments of older songs. Its definition quickly evolved beyond the music and more into the overall aesthetic and culture surrounding it. As such, James's 2011 projects, Condo Pets, and more importantly, Farside Virtual, would get swept up into this phenomenon despite being completely different musically from contemporaries in the field, and him not really intending for that to happen. James has spoken on this album numerous times in interviews, stating it's a collection of 16 ringtones meant to be played on the latest smartphones at the time, but it feels like a lot more than that. There's something beautiful about the idea of taking an art form that's largely viewed as disposable, like a ringtone, jingle, computer startup sound, etc., and magnifying it into something more extensive. Farside Virtual is a refreshingly optimistic album about advancements in technology. While the whole thing was made in GarageBand and intended to match the compression of iPhone 4 speakers, there's something oddly futuristic about it, even to this day. Listening to it makes me feel like a time traveler from the 1700s seeing what a mall is for the first time. It takes that feeling of excitement you get when booting up your GameCube and holds it in place for a solid 46 minutes. It's brilliantly paced too, mixing the catchy melodic MIDI of songs like Linden Dollars, Sim, and Adventures in Green Footing, with more ambient cuts like Bags, Google Posies, and Condo Pets, all while maintaining this concept of progressive ringtones. At the same time though, it's almost a little too pleasant. There's these AI voice clips that come in on numerous tracks that make the whole thing feel like you're living in some kind of WALL-E-esque future where robots have taken over everything and humans have devolved as a species. Yet we're so accustomed to this life of convenience that we don't even question it.
I'm your touch screen waiter. Please take a look at the virtual sushi menu. Player 1 has chosen California roll. Right away, sir.
Whether you see this album as beautiful, terrifying, or just a shitpost, I'd say it's a must-listen for any fan of electronic music. It also has a cool visual album that I've been snagging footage from. Shout out to Helios, the Vaporwave elf, for that one. With James going from the sounds of a fork in a blender to achieving moksha in just a couple of years, he never stopped evolving his sound. In fact, barely over a month after Farside Virtual, he debuted a completely new moniker with a new band called BEBETUNE, also known as Bodyguard, which, according to him,
BEBETUNE is kind of like the sort of the impetus of my new band, really. The official name of it was BEBETUNE, aka Bodyguard. It's no longer me, it's like, I mean, I write most of the music, but I have like a live band and I have other people like working under the project. So I have, it's myself and 3 other members.
Who are these 3 other members? Anyone? Discogs? RYM? Wikipedia? What, none of you know? Damn, that means I have to do actual research. In fact, all the live footage that I've seen from Bodyguard is just him, with the exception of his iconic Primavera sound set where he's on stage with Yves Tumor. In fact, that's the only other person credited every time I try to find a list of the members, and there's numerous pictures of both of them together from around this time, so shout out to them. I'd ask James himself, but he doesn't respond to my tweets or my emails. Reddit doesn't give a shit either. Damn it, I got caught in the act. Whoever was in Bodyguard, though,
need a dick son, a pussy ate, a telebussy.
Because this is probably my favorite era of James. Inhale C$4 by BEBETUNE is absolutely mind-blowing for 2011, taking cloud rap instrumentals in this glitchy, unpredictable direction, complete with drained-out vocals. It was his first project to be released with no label since his old CDR days, and in retrospect feels like a weird overture for a lot of left-field music that would eventually come from SoundCloud. Pitchfork wasn't ready for it. Some of his catchiest tracks are on here, like Pepsi Baby, H2O, and #GrindLife, which sounds like a Farside Virtual ringtone playing on a burner phone. It's fascinating to look back on how quickly and naturally James's sound was evolving around this time, especially on the band's second and only other official full-length project, Silica Gel. It was released a mere 3 months after Inhale C4, yet it's such a massive step forward that I would have guessed it took at least a year. Whereas that album felt like a headfirst plunge into the more wild side of Farside Virtual's iPad-powered world, Silica Gel feels like an exploration of that, with a cute companion holding your hand. The songs are better produced, more ambitious, and just easier to get lost into. I love how metallic and ice cold the whole thing sounds, especially on songs like Fatal, Dry Ice, and Sex Tape. The band also dabbles more in sampling, giving us a cursed version of Like a G6 on the track Turbulence, and making brilliant use of Rihanna's vocals on the opening track. This thing is easily one of the most consistent electronic albums that I've ever heard, and is one of my all-time favorites.
But hold on, it gets even better.
James's contributions to the incomprehensible amount of music accessible on the internet in 2012 were far from over, putting out fire singles like Rainstick Fizz Plus, Smiley Face Earth Jump, and
Trapped in a Hummer. This fall, there is no escape.
While none of these singles were put onto an album officially, the internet said, "F it, we'll do it for you." A fan-made compilation called Prince of Rain Bad Boy Flame, Jesus Christ, I can't even begin to show you that cover art, so I'll use the Sailor Moon one from here on out, has become a fan favorite in his discography, and for good reason. It's a perfect example of a project that sounds epic and large-scale, while still clearly being made by a guy in his basement. The production is cheap, yet really detailed, there's a strong sense of humor and personality, and it's all over the place stylistically. The songs Scent and Save the Planet sound like they came from a game you'd find on miniclip.com back in 2014 that went way harder than it had any right to, before Earth Jump comes in, which is like the best song ever. It's an 11-minute progressive trance song that sounds like an ecstasy-fueled dance party in the middle of a forest. It even seamlessly blends in throat singing in a way that I've never heard any other track in the genre do. He performed an extended version of it live at Primavera Sound, which sounds even earthier and smells like wet grass. The rest of this album, though, is mostly comprised of this ambient song called Rain, which can best be described as 20 minutes of a religious ceremony occasionally interrupted by and the closer, Sex with Axon, which is just a great boner jam. I'd recommend this to anyone who has working ears. Now, with a whole legion of flannel-wearing stoner conspiracy theorists looking to see how James was gonna officially follow up his most popular release so far, he ended his 2012 run with his most professional-sounding album, Sushi. Actually, scratch that. He put out an EP with Dean Blunt called Watch the Throne a few days later, though it's just one ambient track with no cover art, and I don't have a ton to say about it, other than that it's amazing that these two canonically have an album together titled Watch the Throne. While Sushi still very much sounds like James Ferraro, it's easily the most polished thing in his catalog up to this point. 11 tracks and 36 minutes of dense, glitchy dance music that more or less reads like a shorter, higher budgeted Silica Gel. It still has fantastic highlights like the pretty, bittersweet E7, the sci-fi footwork of Playing Yourself, and songs like Flamboyant, Baby Mitsubishi, and especially Lovesick are all early examples of the
deconstructed club
sounds that PC music would cultivate not too long after. A few months later, he would reinvent himself yet again with the mixtape Cold, which carries over the squeaky production of Sushi, but strips it back into something even darker. I love the soulful humming on the epic string arrangements on Coda, and the track Gargoyles, which is this beautifully minimal piano ballad.
I kept you miles away.
Oh yeah, that reminds me, he actually sings on nearly every track here. This is the beginning of his nihilist alt R&B era, because bleeps and bloops weren't getting his point across. In a press release, he said this album is the repetition and consumption of hedonism that cannot represent or replace one night of love, and it outlines human drama in the nihilistic era. Unfortunately, the lyrics on this album haven't been transcribed anywhere because, well, the lyrics that I am able to gather, though, have recurring motifs of materialism affecting the way we view the worth of human life, and corrupt hierarchies ruining the city of New York. These themes would be explored more thoroughly on his next official album, New York City Hell 3 AM, which is often viewed as the darkest project he's ever made, but he actually disagrees with this. In an interview with Self-Titled Mag, he said that he views Farside Virtual as being the darker record because it has a Pixar-esque cartoon facade that distracts from the uncanniness of simulated human contact, whereas this album is more confrontational in its depictions of similar themes. This is made apparent in the first 20 seconds of the record, where a text-to-speech AI says the word money over and over again.
Money, 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 money.
It's really engaging, you know?
There's a lot of moments like this sprinkled throughout the album, alongside James's sleepy and nervous vocals, making it feel one foot in reality and one foot in the Matrix. This is reflected in the production as well, with orchestral ambience playing off of programmed drum beats on songs like Beautiful John K and Upper East Side Pizza. It's a quiet and unsettling commentary on modern technology's impact on economic hierarchies in one of the most capitalist cities in the world, with the QR codes on the cover linking to pages that don't open anymore, but when they did, they linked to a blurb promoting the NYPD Crime Stoppers, the World Trade Center redevelopment plan, and a press release about an office tower being built above the Port Authority bus terminal. It's a really unique and powerful album that sounds nothing like most of his other music up to this point, and yet I don't think any other artist could have made it. He released somewhat of a companion EP about a month later called God of London while he was touring for the album, which consists of these auto-tuned spoken word pieces over what sounds like leftovers from NYC. It's not one of my favorites of his, if I'm being real, but he supposedly recorded 2/3 of it while he was stuck in an airport, which I find pretty neat. He continued to release mixtapes and EPs fully independently, with Suki Girls consisting of 22 untitled cloud rap beats released under the name User
9874131,
1WTC and LAPD, which can best be described as Los Angeles Hell 3am, and War, which is a pretty overlooked project of his that dabbles in heavy industrial music in a catchy way. However, none of these projects could have prepared anyone for his next official album, Skid Row, which is absolutely crazy. Much like NYC, it's centered around themes of the impoverished parts of the United States, but now we're in the West Coast instead of the East, and with a new environment comes a new sound. Listening to Skid Row feels like scanning through an LA radio in the 90s, in the midst of the OJ trial and riots surrounding the beating of Rodney King, with some overly smooth jazz and soft rock to distract from the bleakness. The vocals come off as kind of campy, and the instrumentation is often scattered and hardly even syncs up a lot of the time, yet I feel like that's what makes it stand out so much. It's a much more human-sounding album than NYC, not only because of the broader instrumental palette, but also because of its prominent use of actual news clips and speeches, like on 1992 and the opening track. There's AI text-to-speech on here too, but it's not really as robotic as it is on NYC, especially on $1 Million Man, where Ferraro speaks alongside an AI about how materialism affects physical health.
Out of an air-conditioned Prius, I open the car door. A warm desert heat rushes in.
I think he would execute a lot of the musical ideas here better on later projects, though I do really enjoy the funky groove on Dr. Hollywood, the overwhelming string of guitars and drum beats on Thrash and Escalate, and the whispery vocals on Sentinel Beast. In 2016, he would follow this album up with Human Story 3, aka Farside Virtual 5 years later, aka What the F*** Happened to 1 and 2? Oh, it's just a play on Toy Story 3. Never mind, false alarm, guys. Yeah, he actually ditched the singing on this one and went back to instrumentation plus robots saying the names of companies. He made a long-ass statement on Twitter explaining the premise of this record, and to give you the TLDR version, it's basically what I imagine the Pitchfork review for Farside Virtual sounds like. Modern technology, it's simultaneously mankind's greatest achievement, while also making us more stupider. While this album's similar in its themes and production style to Farside, it plays out like one big piece of modern classical music rather than a collection of individual ringtones. It's unsettlingly polished, there's less emphasis on tunes and more on song progressions and atmosphere, but it's still extremely catchy at times. I love how the title of the album plays into its themes as well, framing humans as these tiny creatures that are ultimately powerless to the systems we've created. It really feels like living in a world where the lines between reality and fiction are blurred, which is emphasized by the only human vocals being undercut by digital ones. He would dabble more in this brand of Uncanny Valley classical music on the more stripped back and suspenseful Burning Prius, and Extinction Renaissance, which soundtracked an art installation he did in Stockholm that included the iconic Roblox video. In 2017, he released a few singles where he goes back to singing, like Nemesis, Open Carry Drift, and Twilight Pretender. Twilight Pretender. Yo, where did this come from? Sure, it's not too far removed from some of the soft rock on Skid Row, and given James's track record, I really shouldn't be surprised by anything he's made by now. But still, this is beautiful. It's a perfect song to soundtrack gazing at the stars while you're contemplating your entire life. Unfortunately, these singles wouldn't make their way onto an official album, but since when has that stopped us? Hollywood Vishnu is another fan-made compilation of singles, many from 2017, some from even earlier, which is a cyber country wave epic that was never finished. Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of the songs on here kind of end before they start, like the opener Nemesis, which would be a fantastic cross between rock, cloud rap, and alt R&B if it didn't fade out right when it was getting good. Wait, what? That's it? I know there has to be a finished version on your laptop. Nearly every track here ends pretty abruptly, but not before giving us some of the best music in his whole catalog. Angels Are Near is a perfect snippet of alternate dimension 80s music, complete with arena-sized guitars and big saxes, and Hollywood Vishnu is probably the most SoundCloud-ass country song ever recorded. The only completed sounding songs here, aside from Twilight Pretender, are K-Town, which is this lo-fi synthwave banger, and Thrash and Escalate, which was already on Skid Row. This album's kind of frustrating in that it sounds like a blueprint for what could have been a masterpiece, but it's definitely still worth checking out if you like the clips I played. Speaking of bootlegs, I may as well talk about WĒNQUÁN while we're in the neighborhood. This is a compilation of singles and tracks that James uploaded somewhere on the internet and then took down for whatever reason, but I'd say it's canon in his discography regardless. It's 80 minutes of material that spans many different parts of his career, yet feels like it all belongs on the same project, except for the fact that some of the songs were mixed louder than others and you gotta adjust the volume and it gets distracting. There's some excellent songs here, like Period and T.O.N.Y, which are both pretty long and progressive exercises and down-tempo that make me smell the rain outside of my window at night, and Lies, which sounds like it was recorded during the Night Dolls with Hairspray era, yet it's still dark and sparse enough to fit in with the rest of the album. Admittedly, a lot of the songs on here come off pretty half-baked and just have ideas that I think were executed better on his actual albums. But if you're into the more crudely assembled side of James's music, then I can see why this is a favorite among some of his fans. In 2018, he debuted one of his most ambitious projects so far in the form of 4 Pieces for Mirai, an instrumental concept album spanning 4 albums about the decline of civilization in the internet age, told through the lens of a computer virus. It started with an EP that functioned as an overture for the rest of the albums, and is one of my favorites of his. It seamlessly combines these pretty synths with the sounds of nature, acoustic guitars, and noise in this way that's beautiful but uncanny. The song progressions flow naturally, the melodies are catchy, and it really feels like exploring a beautiful, simulated world that has a tendency to glitch out sometimes. Each album in the series so far has gotten progressively darker, with Requiem for Recycled Earth being a bit less melodic but more large-scale and earthy, Neurologist sounding more computerized with a greater emphasis on arpeggiators, and Terminus being the most abrasive of the bunch. Album 4 hasn't come out yet. James' ambitions as an artist go far beyond just the music though, not only because of the art installations and discourse surrounding the music itself, but also because of what he's done outside of that wheelhouse. In 2018, he premiered an opera in Germany called Plague about Steve Jobs coming back to life and reacting to how all of this technology has impacted humanity.
Of a hedonic empire.
He's currently working on an analog horror puzzle game called Desolation Seed that you can go to the Steam page for right now. However, nothing that he's ever done creatively can possibly stack up to what is currently his newest album, which is all about Christmas, baby! For real though, it's pretty good. I know I didn't talk about this album or that album or this album, but I'm just one guy. Come on, give me a break. If you made it this far and still don't know what to listen to, I left a list of some of my favorite albums and songs of his in the description, and I'd like to know what some of your favorites are. As always, if you enjoyed the video, you know the drill.